Hey there. Happy every day. Sharon Horne-Ellstrom here, but you can call me Pajama Grandma. Today, as our happy everyday daily share, we are looking in the book, of course, Do One Thing a Day That Makes You Happy. It's a little journal type book. And every day this year, I am finding ways to make myself feel happier. Last year, I did things to stretch my comfort zone. This year, I'm doing things to make me feel happier. And today is what I call a dreaded blank line day. And I realized at the end of last year, totally at the end of last year, that when there's these blank line days, there's a saying that goes with them. And so the saying, last year I didn't do this, I did it as a separate day. But this year I'm like, okay, I think there's more than 365 days in here. So let's go ahead and actually use it the way I think it was designed to be used. But it took some of us a long time to figure that out. So the saying says, let me see if I can open that. It's going to be backwards for you. Friendships multiply joy and divide grief. Friendships multiply joy and divide grief. And that was said by Thomas Fuller. And so that got me to thinking, I'm going to use these pages as kind of a summary catch-up. What are the lessons I've learned? What are just some of my observations as I'm going through this exercise of finding more joy and more happiness in my life? And so whenever I come across one of those, and they're pretty frequent actually, I remember dreading them, like here's another one already. And there's probably one in between, yep, probably one or two in between that. Here's another one. And so I'm going to do it differently than I did last year. There's another one. Wow, there's a lot of them where it's just the sayings in the blank line state. And there may be a lot more in this particular journal book than there were in the Do One Thing a Day That Scares You. So today's challenge is friends who divided my grief today. So I want to write down and pay attention to as I'm going about my day, people that helped me not feel so much grief or stress or strain or worry or doubt or fear, because to me, grief is all of those things and much, much more. And what I wrote down was I'm going to ask for help on a big project that I'm working on, a couple big projects that I'm working on. One is the Women's Summit, and the other one is moving. I'm physically moving out of my home into another home, and that means moving my office, my podcasting stuff, my video gear, my books. I have lots of books, my clothes, my everything has to move, right? Both my home and my office. So it's a ton of work, but I need to remember to let people help me with this big project and this big job, because I don't have to do it all by myself. I don't know what makes us think sometimes, and maybe you don't think that, but I am terrible about thinking I have to do everything myself. And the other one I'm going to do that comes to mind with this today, and what thought came to my mind was that I'm going to help other people to solve their problems and to give them, give to others so that they have some relief from their grief or their stress or their worry or their doubts or their fears or their strain or their not feeling good enough, whatever it is. So not only will I accept help, but I'm also going to give help where I can be of service to other people. So friendships multiply joy and divide grief. So true. Yesterday we talked about how friendships multiply our joy and make us happy. And today we're talking about looking for, well, how can they help us with the harder, darker times in our life? Grief in and of itself, when somebody dies, I hadn't lost really anybody super duper close to me until my father died 4 years ago. And I don't think until you lose someone really close to you, you get it, or you understand it, or you understand how the grief process really works. I mean, getting divorced, it's a grieving process as well, but the person isn't dead. When someone is actually transitioned and gone from our lives, it makes a very big impact, and we all deal with that differently. And we deal with grief not just when we lose somebody, but we have grief over any sort of loss, letting go of any type thing. When relationships end, when jobs end, jobs are relationships, right? When businesses end, when we let go of some of our businesses or some of the other things that we thought were so important and so critical to our life, that can trigger the grief process. So let our friends, let people around us help us to alleviate some of that grief, some of that pain and suffering, because we don't have to really have a whole lot of pain and suffering in our life. I got into a discussion the other day where I said I think suffering is optional, because there's all of this talk in one of the markets I run in is the online marketing business world. And there's all this grief and talk about, oh, being an entrepreneur, being an online business owner is so lonely and such a struggle, and you have to work hard and hustle. And I'm like, I don't buy into any of that. Now, I might have 20 years ago, but now I've learned so much more. No, I realize that struggling, grief, doubt, worry, fear. Those are all optional. We don't have to struggle. We don't have to feel grief. I mean, I think sometimes we do because it's a natural process that we want to go through, but we don't have to suffer in it for decades. We can go through the grieving process as quickly or as slowly as we choose. And that's the critical piece, is that we get to choose. So I say, let's choose happiness. Let's be happy every day. Go out, make it a fantastic day. Be happy today. And of course, I'll be with you tomorrow.